your siblings will be looking for help down in the future. Maybe you're the only one that can help us. So with that reasoning, I said, okay, I'll go.
Paging Dr. Cook. Paging Dr. Cook. Dr. Cook, you're wanted in the OR. Dr. Cook, you're wanted in the OR.
Welcome to the Prescription for Success podcast with your host, Dr. Randy Cook.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Prescription for Success. I'm Dr. Randy Cook, your host for the podcast, which is a production of MD Coaches, providing leadership and executive coaching for physicians by physicians to overcome burnout, transition your career, develop as a leader, or whatever your goal might be. Visit MD Coaches on the web at mymdcoaches.com because you're not in this alone. And don't forget, CME credit is available when you listen with us. Just look for CMify in the show notes to learn how. Well, in today's episode, which is being released on July 4th, our RX for Success team thought it would be fitting to do something a little different in recognition of Independence Day. So in this episode, we'll be playing a short segment from 4 previous interviews featuring physicians who were born in foreign countries and decided to make their home in this country. We're calling it Coming to America, and we'll begin with a clip from episode number 64, featuring wound care and hyperbaric medicine specialist Dr. Jayesh Shah, and his story of leaving home in India to become a physician in the USA. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's my understanding that you actually start your medical education in India, comparatively speaking, at about the same time that you would have graduated from high school in the U.S. Am I close to correct?
That is correct. Yeah, I think we basically start medical school when we are in 18s, and then, but it is kind of 5.5 to 6 year. And we get Bachelor of Medicine and Bachelor of Surgery. So we get MBBS. And so to complete the whole thing, it takes 6 years. So yeah, we do get done a couple of years earlier than a regular student in the United States.
Sure. And tell me about the decision and how you came to it that you would move to the U.S. That had to have been a big deal for you.
Oh, it was a huge deal, and I still remember that I was debating with my friends and family whether I should do it or not. And my sister and my brother-in-law was in Canada at that time, and they are the one who kind of inspired me to at least look around and see if this is something which you will like to do. So I just came on vacation for a couple of weeks during my medical school to see whether this is something I would like to do. And I came to Canada and visited the United States in 1990 or 1991 for the first time, and checked out some of the universities and the hospitals, and checked out some of the friends who have been ahead of me, and I felt, looks like this may be something I want to do.
Sure.
And follow your dream,
And so you landed a residency in internal medicine at Columbia University. That's a pretty big deal.
That was.
Did you realize that? Did you know that you had really sort of hit it out of the park on that?
Yeah, that was a huge deal, and I was really very happy. I still remember the moment when I signed a contract to be a resident at Columbia University. I just made a call right away from the, at that time, you had to call from the telephone stations, right? Yeah.
Right.
So you went down and made an international call, and yeah, I still remember those moments. It's definitely a life-changing moment,
Yeah, I bet it was.
and yeah, and really, really very grateful.
These stories of people making America their home by their own choice always come with some examples of incredible determination. Dr. J. Mustafa escaped the 1970s civil war in Lebanon at great risk. He arrived in New York City, a teenager, unable to speak a word of English with just a few dollars in his pocket and a dream in his heart. Today, he is an internationally famous cardiologist. So let's hear a little bit of that story from episode number 24.
So you had your very first experience with tending to the sick long before your entry into medical school, right?
Yes, and actually I never was interested in becoming a doctor at the time in Lebanon. But the circumstances back then pushed me into doing this, and I did it many times, many days. And it's, some people find it hard to talk about. Some people don't. The way I look at it is trying to help somebody, because it's what I was told to go and help somebody. And you do what it takes to help somebody. And that kind of stuck with me for life. So that's my approach to life right now, is help anyone in need that I can help.
Yeah, and that was clearly the right thing to do at that time, and it clearly has had a profound effect on your life. It's a fascinating story, and thank you for sharing it with us. I want to move forward, fast forward, if you will, and get to the point where you and your brother began to conspire to get the both of you to the U.S. Tell us about that.
So the war continued, and it's. I think at the time, as I mentioned, Randy, our age, we're not really sure exactly. This is the age that we were given, and the paperwork that we were given. So we were allowed to go to the embassy and get a visa to come to the U.S. If you're at a certain age, you can do that. So,
and were your parents aware that you all were doing that?
No, we were separated from my parents. So I will go back and mention that. So the war actually got worse, really bad. And my parents decided to split their kids, in different part of the country and go around and visit them. So, or you stay with an aunt or an uncle or anything. The village that we were in, it was the one on the border with Israel. And at the time, Israel had taken over this village, so you couldn't leave and no one could come in. And
right.
Basically, there was nothing going on there except, war and fighting back and forth. Actually, told my brother that my father said there's papers for us. Also, the Israeli army mentioned that you can go and apply and you can go to the United States or Canada. So I told my brother, we should go. And, I was more aggressive than my brother was at the time. So we needed $800 to be able to go to Tel Aviv. So we went and got the money, and we needed passports. We had them. Went to the Israeli like a building where they're staying. And we asked them, how can we go to Tel Aviv? We have papers to go to the embassy. And they told us to come back the second day in the morning, 8 o'clock, and then they'll help us. So the second day at 8 o'clock, we arrived. But before I get to that point, the $800, the way we raised it, we went from door to door in the village, saying we're the sons of Haj Ali, which is my father, and we need money to make an attempt to flee and go to the United States. And everybody gave us what they can, $20, $10, $50. Finally, we made the $800.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
You just walked from door to door. Now, were these strangers that you were calling on, or were they people that you knew?
I didn't know all of them, but in our village, everybody knows everybody, like the father level, at the father level.
It's a great example of the mentality that ensues when everybody is under attack. That's amazing. You just help everybody, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly what happened. And you watch as you grow, kids, when they come talk to my father, they never say their name. They always say, I'm the son of so-and-so. And my father would just know exactly who they are. And I figured we'll do the same. Now, my brother was not happy about it. So he was always behind me when we did this. And so once we collected the money and we counted it many times, Randy, because we did not want to be short. So we made sure we have $800. So we had exactly $800. So we went to the Israeli post, and then they took us in a car to Cross Point. And when we got to the Cross Point, we needed to get to Tel Aviv. And we didn't want to pay any money to get there because we didn't have enough money. We didn't calculate for taxi.
I understand.
In Lebanon, there was no such thing as taxi. We're not used to that.
A teenager doesn't have that kind of foresight, right?
No, did not have that part. So I went back inside and talked to the soldiers and told them that, this would really hurt us a lot in terms of getting enough money to achieve the goal. And, sometimes when God wants things to work out, they work out. So he was able to put us in the back of a truck that was going to a certain point that is close to Tel Aviv. So we sat in the back of the truck, and at the time I had 2 pants, 2 shirts, and that's it. My brother had the same. And the truck took us, dropped us off, and he told us, if you walk that way, the embassy is right there. So we walked probably for about 15 minutes. We found the embassy, got in, as if everything was waiting for us. Did everything we need to do, including physical exam, got our visas. We went to buy tickets, and we found that we only have enough money for one. So,
oh my goodness.
In our culture, the older sibling always makes the decision. So he said, well, you're going to go first, and I'll go back and save money and raise money, and then I'll follow you in a few months. Of course, we argued back and forth a little bit, but he gets the last say. And he gave me $80, which that's all we have left. He kept 20 with him. And I got the tickets, and I came to the United States, and I arrived in June sometimes at 4 p.m. at JFK.
Hi, I'm Rhonda Crow, founder and CEO for MD Coaches. Here on RX for Success, we interview a lot of great medical professionals on how they grew their careers, how they overcame challenges, and how they handle day-to-day work. I really hope you're getting a lot of great information. But if you're looking for an answer to a specific problem, management or administration challenge, or if you're feeling just a bit burnt out, like maybe you chose the wrong career, well, then there's a faster way to get the help you need. No, it's not counseling, it's coaching. RX for Success is produced by MD Coaches, a team of physicians who have been where you are. I know you're used to going it alone, but you don't have to. Get the support you need today. Visit us at mymdcoaches.com to schedule your complimentary consultation. Again, that's mymdcoaches.com, because you're not in this alone.
We'll get back to our interview in just a moment, but right now I want to tell you a little bit about Physician Outlook. If you haven't discovered this remarkable magazine, please do so very soon. It was created by physicians, for physicians, to showcase the intersection between clinical and non-clinical interests, whether it's writing, painting, cooking, politics, and dozens of other topics. Physician Outlook gives a physician perspective. It's available online and in print. It's really unique among physician lifestyle magazines. And like the Prescription for Success podcast, Physician Outlook amplifies the voice of any physician who has something to say. It also engages patients who still believe in physician-led, team-based care. And Prescription for Success listeners can get 3 months free when you enter our promo code RX for Success and select the monthly option at checkout. That's a really great deal on this stunning publication. Escape from violence and war has been the force that brought lots of people to America. Dr. Luan Nguyen fled Vietnam as a teenager with her family in 1975 during the fall of Saigon. In episode number 99, we heard the story of how she found her way to the U.S. and became a successful internist despite immense obstacles and fueled by nothing but her own determination.
Because I was from a very poor family, and medical school, when I finished college, I passed my baccalaureate degree exam with really high score. And so I thought about medical school, applying to medical school. I came to my parents and they said, we can't afford for you to go to Saigon to study. So what is your next choice? And I said, well, I guess I could go to become a teacher. So I enrolled in a University of Dalat, in my hometown. And so I started enrolling in 1974, right after high school. During that year, is in April of that year, is when the South Vietnamese government started to fall. As you remember, the communist military people started to take one city one by one, starting from the north and down to the south.
I remember it vividly.
Right. Dalat was right in the middle of between south and central part of the country.
Believe it or not, I was actually employed as a radio announcer during those years, and I actually read that news over American radio.
Yeah. And so because of that, when it came close to Dalat, we thought, my family innocently thought, my mother and father instantly thought, well, perhaps the country will get divided again. And so why don't we go south, the further south? So we went back down to Saigon to be with my relative. And then in April of that year, as you can see that on TV, that it was the fall of the South government was imminent. And I was at a loss. My family was at a loss. What will become of us?
Sorry, you were how old at that point?
19.
Okay.
I had a cousin who married to an American GI, and they were stationing in Guam. This is the magic of the story. So my cousin had a mother and a brother in Saigon at the time. And somehow her husband was able to connect with the American embassy, and they said they called my cousin, my aunt and my cousin, and said, we need to get you out of the country because you are affiliated with American having American family in America. We need to get you out. And so give me a list of people that you need to get out. And my cousin, who was like a brother to me, thought of me and another cousin. So he jotted his name, his mother's name, and my name, and my other cousin's name. And so the next morning, he came to my mother and father and said, this is the only chance for me to get out. So I have to leave the country. But I also have your Luan's name on the list to leave the country. Would you let her go? Within an instant, my parents said, of course, she needs to go because she is so interested in education. And with the communist scheme, there's no way that she can continue with her education.
My goodness, that must have been...
It was scary.
I just can't imagine what your parents must have been feeling and what you must have been feeling.
So that he came to the place where we stay. He said, you have 2 hours to decide. I'll come back in 2 hours to pick her up if that's what you decide. And my first reaction was, how could I leave my family? I never knew anything other than my family.
Of course.
So, and my parents said, they explained and they said, you have to go because we know how much you love to study, love to learn, and that will be the end if you stay. And 2 is that if you go, we have some hope that you may be able to help us somehow in the future. I'm the oldest of 7 children. And so they said, your siblings will be looking for help down in the future. Maybe you're the only one that can help us. So with that reasoning, I said, okay, I'll go.
What an amazing story. Amazing.
So within 2 hours, I got picked up with, at that time, as you imagine, people running to the embassy, which looking for a way to leave the country, and people who would drive to the coast looking for a way to leave the country. So I got picked up by a unmarked bus that basically pitch dark. They just scoop you in, take you to the airport. And so I left with my cousin, my aunt, and my other cousin. We stayed at the airport. That was April 27, which is 3 days before the actual fall of the government.
Attention healthcare professionals. Have you lost control of your career? Do you feel like you need to hit the reset button? If you're tired of uncertainty, struggling to find balance in your career, frustrated with pay cuts, extended shifts, or insurance aggravation, well then, it's time for you to change your life and carve out the career of your dreams. Join Dr. Jarrett Patton and others at Licensed to Live, the conference, July 8 through 10, 2022, live from the Bellevue in Philadelphia. Explore the vast possibilities available to you as a physician or healthcare executive and ignite your career into the life you desire. Hear from expert healthcare professionals as they offer actionable, dynamic, and inspirational information, and get ready to leave inspired, ready to create the career you love, licensed to live. It's time for you to be happy. And as an added benefit, all attendees become subscribers to receive the print copy of Physician Outlook magazine. For early bird reservations, go to rxforsuccesspodcast.com/live. In our final story in this episode, we hear from Dr. Inshi Zama. He came to America on a student visa with only $20 in his pocket. Literally raised in a grass hut, he witnessed the death of his mother in childbirth as a result of lack of medical care. That event created a shift in his life's purpose, and in episode number 102, we heard how he not only became a physician in this country, he was recently a candidate for governor of the state of Pennsylvania.
So, yes, as you stated, I was actually born in a little grass hut village in Cameroon, the northwestern part of Cameroon in Africa. And I was raised by Christian, conservative, illiterate subsistence farmers. My mom and dad were very loving, but were strict disciplinarians. And, we were just a normal village family at that time. And
just to give us a feel about how many citizens were there in that village?
Probably, I want to say about 5,000. Okay, I would say. And so it was a good-sized village.
Yeah.
And so at a very young age, I started to agitate that I wanted to go to school. And my parents kept telling me I was too young, and I kept agitating, and because I had an older cousin who was about 4 years older than me, and he would start at elementary school, actually. He was attending a Catholic school, missionary school. And, there was something about education that it just totally, completely transformed him. I mean, I loved his uniform. He was learning a new language, and he sang these nice Christian missionary songs that I'd never heard before. And just his mannerisms, his whole attitude.
Yeah, but just to make sure we have the entire flavor of what's going on here, it sounds as if in your little village that it was not necessarily a given that a child was going to go to school. Is that right?
That's right. Well, there were so few educational opportunities, and you're exactly right. And a lot of parents, as a child, you had duties. You joined your father and your mother on the farm. And so there was always something to do. And so this whole concept of education to a lot of villages was not something they really embraced. Mm-hmm. But my uncle, who sent my cousin to school, he had a couple of years of education. So there was just something, he knew something that probably my parents didn't know, And well, in any case, so at 3 years of age, my uncle finally took me to a school. It was a Presbyterian school, but I was summarily rejected because they said I was too young. And so I was very sad. And the same day, when we left that school, he says, well, all right, well, let's go to the Catholic elementary school and see what they say. We got there, same thing. It's too young. Go home, maybe come back next year or the year after.
Didn't even give you an audition.
Well, they didn't even give me a time of day. At least the first school, they got to talk to me and ask a few questions. And so finally, I got back to the village. I'm really down in the dumps, feeling down because I wanted to go to school. And there's just education. I wanted to be like my cousin. And so I had an uncle showed up and says, hey, did you hear the one about there's a new Baptist missionary school they're opening? And boy, we took off like a bat out of hell and trekking not too far away from the village. We got to the place and there was a long line of parents and students waiting to make their case for admission. And we joined the line. And when we got to the teacher, we call him the headmaster, he was the first teacher. And I can remember him like yesterday. Mr. Wanke was his name. There was a one-room school in a hut. And my uncle kept pleading with him. And I was standing here myself looking very sad and anxious. And so he looked at me and he said, and I remember like it was yesterday, he says, we'll take him. And so I started elementary school that day. And boy, was I excited. Okay. And as I've always said, I never went back to the village mentally because I started to learn new things and my mind was traveling around the world. I lived in a village physically, but mentally I was, gone. And then I was, at that time, living with my grandmother who was a leper. And, people didn't understand leprosy. She had lost her digits, her thumbs and her toes, and she was living alone in a neighboring village. And so my parents asked if I would live with her. Well, they didn't really ask. I said, you go live with grandma and you help her out. And so we lived together in that one-room tiny hut. So
were you serving more or less as her caregiver?
Yes, I was her caregiver.
I see.
And I would watch. I remember distinctly a finger or two just falling off. They rots away, like with leprosy. Wow. And she had sores, and I would help clean them, and they smelled. But she was so loving, Grandma, And what really saddened me is oftentimes she and I would be walking to the farm or something, and people would see her and her deformities, and they'll shun her and make funny sounds and despise her. And I would get so angry, and she would look at me and say, son, don't get angry. She goes, within everybody, there's good and there's bad. You need to focus on the good. They're good people. They just don't understand. And so those were very powerful lessons in life that I began to learn living with my leper grandmother. And then I continued school. And when I got to the third grade, I was skipping a grade actually to the next grade, but they didn't have a new school. They needed to build a new school. So I got to the campus at the beginning of the year, and we were told, we couldn't continue there. So I trekked to another Baptist school, which was about, I want to say 6 to 8 miles away from the village. And that's where I enrolled. But it was just really difficult getting up every morning and trekking. A long walk through the woods. There was no highway.
Sure.
So my parents had me transferred back to that Presbyterian school that had initially rejected me a few years earlier. And so I was closer to home. And every night, Mom and Dad, when she got home from the farm, and she made dinner and we ate and had that kerosene lamp. She'd light it in the lamp and so she'll have me sit down and say, son, sit your butt down and start studying. And I would do homework every single night. And I want to say 2 hours minimum. And things were going great. And there was something about education. I've always often talked about this, that my enthusiasm for education became infectious as far as my parents were concerned, to a point where sometimes my dad would ask me to teach him some of the things I've been learning.
Really?
And, oh, yes. He was so excited. And I taught him the ABCs and numbers and stuff. He's just a poor farmer. He couldn't read or write. And so at about 10 years of age, my parents got arrested because I had an uncle who had about a 6th grade education. And he was agitating about a new philosophy we'd never heard of, or nobody called democracy. At that time we were in socialism and dictatorship.
So he was a troublemaker.
And he would talk to people about freedoms and liberties and rights and, to the natives. And the government got wind of it and they sent their agents to arrest him and kill him, really. And he heard about it and he, under cover of darkness, he ran away. And so when the gendarmes, the police, when they came and couldn't find him, they arrested my dad and mom. They thought they knew his whereabouts. And so they were taken to jail and left us poor kids alone in that hut. I'll never forget how sad, one of the most difficult times. I still oftentimes, my sister and I, my older sister, when we chat, we reminisce, and that always comes up, how tough a time that was for us, And my mother was raped in jail. My father was tortured. But eventually they were both let go and our lives continued. And then one day I was coming back from school. I was about 10 years of age. I ran into my Uncle Simon in the bush path somewhere. And he looked very anxious. I'd never seen that look on his face. And I go, what's the matter, Uncle Simon? Well, your mother's not doing well. She went to the hospital to give birth and she needs blood. So for a 10-year-old needs blood. I've never heard of somebody needing blood. So I ran off to the hospital. And when I got there, and it was just a hospital in name, there was one doctor at the hospital, only one doctor. And it was just a bush hospital. When I walked into the room, my mom was in a corner. There was blood flowing from her groin, making a puddle on the floor. And she was writhing in pain and just moaning and just in terrible distress. She heard my voice and she goes, son, go home, I'm dying. And I says, mommy, please don't die. I ran across to her, held her hand, squeezed her hand and her leg. And standing in the corner in the same room was a nurse with her arms up in the air. And she was crying, actually. And she kept saying, repeating, there's no doctor, there's no doctor. There's no doctor. And I kept squeezing my mom's hand and she kept saying, son, go home. I says, no, mommy, please don't die. Unfortunately, she died. And I hadn't really seen my baby brother who had just been born a few hours before, And unfortunately, a couple of weeks later, he too died because we didn't have a neonatal intensive care, all the resources we have in the modern world. But that night, as I left the room and I was walking back to the village, the words of that nurse were ringing in my ear. There's no doctor. So I decided I wanted to be a doctor because doctors save lives. And I didn't want any child ever to experience what I just experienced. And I didn't want any parent to have to suffer like my mom had just suffered. So I says, I want to be a doctor so I can save lives.
I got to tell you that the most powerful answer to the question, why did you want to be a doctor, that I have ever heard.
Yeah.
And I doubt seriously that it'll ever be surpassed. That is really powerful.
That's the day that I made the decision that I wanted to be a doctor. And so I got back to the village. And I have to tell you, 3 months before that, before her death, my mom and I had been sitting right in front of our hut. In an afternoon, we were chatting. I was mommy's boy, And there was the best boarding school, secondary school, was a few miles away from the village. And once a week, they let out those kids on Wednesdays to go to the city and run errands. And the path that they would take to the city came right in front of our hut. And so we're sitting there, my mom and I, and these kids come walking past and all handsome little boys dressed up in their uniforms. And my mother looked at me. I'm standing next to her, and she looked at the kids and she goes, "Son, that's where I want you to go to school. If you ever enter that school, I will die a happy mother."
Wow.
And so she goes, "That's the best school, and that's where I want you to go." And after she died, I went there to seek admission, and they didn't have room in the first year. They only had a spot in the second year. I says, "I'll take it." My same uncle again took me. And so I enrolled, and you can imagine it's like starting college in the sophomore year. And so I hadn't heard of chemistry, and the kids in the second year had a year of chemistry, year of physics, year of biology, math, geometry, trigonometry, all these new concepts I'd never heard of. So I would be studying first year material and second year material simultaneously. It's something, it's just very hard to describe. Those were probably the most challenging times in my life, my academic life. But most importantly, I've always said, God, on your journey in life, God plans angels along the way. And one of those angels, among many, was an American Peace Corps volunteer. And the Peace Corps movement was just very powerful at that time, and probably still is. And he took particular interest in me, and he would feed me books, incessantly, because I loved to read. I just had a voracious appetite for books. And one day he said, "Son, you're a very hardworking student," because I would leave campus sometimes and go to my farm. I had a little farm where I grew corn, pineapples, vegetables. I would sell to defray some of my school costs, expenses. And he says, "Son, you work very hard. If you go to America, you can be the doctor you've always wanted to be. Because if you work hard, 2 words in America, you would be successful." I remember those 2 words, work hard. So when I graduated, I applied to multiple colleges, but the schools I applied to in America, I would select schools with very low tuition because I knew I'd be working hard. I didn't have anybody to help sponsor me. And I got into a school in Baltimore called Coppin. And then one day the natives all sat around in our hut and they donated what amounted to $20 for pocket money. And my father sold our house with the crops around it and the land to a rich man and got $300. And with that, he bought me a one-way ticket to New York City.
My goodness.
Yeah. And here I was, I skipped about 3 or 4 grades total between elementary and secondary school. And I was just a little teenager when I arrived in New York City, not knowing any, all by myself.
What did you think of that when you arrived in New York?
Oh, man, I was scared. You got to read this book. I wrote this book. The title is Mommy, Please Don't Die, which is based on the last words I shared with my mother. But in that book, I detail my first experience in America was, to say, challenging at best, because I exchanged the money that I brought. It was 10,000 francs, got about $20. I got scammed out of the money.
Oh, no.
I had enough to finally left the airport, and I got to Port Authority bus station, and there I encountered another angel, and he helped me out with the luggage. I must have looked really confused trying to negotiate, navigate through the subway. I'd never been on a train. I mean, there was just, everything was new. I'd never seen it.
Did you speak any English at that time?
Oh, yeah, I did, because I'd gone to an English-speaking secondary school.
I see. Okay.
And also I spoke French. Now I speak 6 languages, but then I only spoke about 3.
I see. Only 3.
Yeah. And so he gave me $20 and I was able to catch a bus to Baltimore. I got to Baltimore, same thing. Didn't have any money. A cab driver took me right across the street up the hill to the YMCA. And where I checked in, they told me if you're in any city and you're stuck in America, go to a YMCA. And so I got in, and they allowed me to register without paying this, because I promised them I'll find a way to pay.
We certainly hope you've enjoyed these inspiring stories of physicians coming to America, and we thank you for joining us today. We'd really appreciate a review from you, and a 5-star rating helps give our podcast much more visibility. Exclusive content is available on our Patreon page, including membership-only material like personal rapid-fire Q&A sessions with our guests. And to be sure you never miss an episode, visit our website at rxforsuccesspodcast.com to subscribe. While you're there, learn how to get CME credit from CMify just by listening. Special thanks to Ryan Jones, who created and performs our theme music. And remember, be sure to fill your prescription for success with my next episode.